What's up everybody, Jeff here, and I am super excited because I finally got to get my hands on Halo Flashpoint. Now, I had already tried it out by playing a demo at Adepticon a couple of months back, but now I actually have a copy of the game that I'm able to play in the wild, and I'm really excited about it. Playing the demo was really promising, but now that I've actually had a chance to play it myself, I have to say that I'm even more optimistic and excited about where this game is going. When I got the demo, originally I was thinking that this game was going to be a nice palate cleanser, something kind of really fast and light that I would play in between other crunchier war games. But honestly, having played a game in person, I think there's a little bit more depth to the game than it seemed like at first. And I'm also really excited about where they might grow the game in the future. In the couple of games that I played, we had some really fun cinematic moments that were ripped right out of a game of Halo multiplayer, and I think they did an excellent job of capturing the same feel of playing Halo multiplayer, which is exactly what they seem to have been going for with this game. Now, full disclosure, Mantic did give me a copy of the game for free at Gencon this year, so huge thanks to them. But they didn't have any strings attached to that. They just gave me a copy for coverage purposes and told me to do what I want with it. So, of course, I will be telling you my honest opinion. Now, that's pretty cool because when the game first went up for pre-order, I, of course, pre-ordered a copy of the Spartan edition, which is the sort of higher tier, a little bit more all-inclusive version of the game. And that one's not going to be out for a couple of weeks until the general release of the game. But at Gen Con, they actually had the Recon Edition, which is the more entry-level version of the game, available for sale on the floor. And I definitely would have been pretty sad if I wasn't able to go home with one. Now, I'm excited to get back into the game and get a couple of more games in, and I have a lot of plans for upcoming videos related to the game, so definitely make sure that you're subscribed if you're interested in learning more. Now, opening up the box for the Recon Edition, it basically has everything you need to get started playing Halo Flashpoint. It's got these cardboard sheets with terrain as well as tokens. It's got a map that's double-sided to be used for a little demo game, as well as a 2x2 version, which is for a more full-size run of the game. And the cool thing is, the smaller version of the map actually has a bunch of reference cards around the outside and explanations of some of the more common rules, so it's really easy to get going for your first time. We then have the minis, and of course we have 4 blue Spartans and 4 red Spartans, and they are copies of the same models. So each side has the same force with the same 4 profiles going up against each other. Now, these models are actually really nice quality. At first glance, they might look like board game models, and I think I would describe them as extremely high-end board game models. They're not going to hold up to some of the nicer war game models that you might be familiar with out there. The details aren't going to be quite as crisp, but they do have a lot more detail than I was expecting out of something like this. And as far as single-piece models go, they are extremely nice. On top of that, there was very little in the way of mold lines. Pretty much all the Spartans only had a little bit of a mold line on the inside of some of their legs. And I did find that the plastic that these are made out of is a little bit soft, so it is a little bit harder to scrape the mold lines off. You just have to be kind of careful and use a really sharp blade to do it. On top of that, there was almost no connection points, which is really cool. Most of them just had one single connection point on the back of one of their calves, and that was easy enough to just scrape off with a pair of cutters or a blade. Overall, really happy with the quality of the models. I think the biggest thing is that these bases make them look like board game models. So the coolest thing that you can do if you want to upgrade these things is cut those bases off of their feet and put them on some more traditional wargaming bases. I can't tell you how far that goes in making these look more like proper miniatures for a wargame. And if you'd be interested in a video on how I went about doing that and putting them on these proper bases, then drop a comment below and let me know. I've already painted up my red team of Spartans, but I'm going to be tackling the blue team pretty soon. And as soon as I get my Spartan edition, of course, I'll be doing all the models in that as well. Now, going back to the box, we also have the stat cards, as well as a couple of reference cards, and then the smaller cards that have the item pickups, as well as alternate weapons that you can pick up in the game. The tokens and terrain are actually very nice. The cardboard that they come on is pretty thick, and it was pretty easy to punch out of these frames. I decided to assemble all of my terrain just by sliding everything together, and it all fit pretty well, so I had no problems with playing all of this without actually gluing any of it. I didn't have any issues with anything falling apart, and I think that's actually probably the best way to go because it leaves you the option to disassemble the stuff to put it back in the box or put it in storage if you want to. Of course, you can glue the stuff together if you want to go that route, but I don't think it's necessary, and I was really impressed by the quality of the terrain. Super nice stuff. It only took me a couple of minutes to put together everything that comes in the box, and you get a pretty decent variety between these like shipping container type things, as well as these crates, and different little barricades that you can populate the board with. On the smaller version of the map, it actually has a prearranged layout, and it ends up being a pretty dense board, but it's pretty cool to see your Spartans trying to jump over and navigate some of that stuff. On the bigger side of the board, you can use all the terrain, and it fills it up with a reasonable amount, but I think this side is a little bit lighter, which is probably more along the lines of what you're going to expect to see in a normal play of the game. Now, I'm really curious about the premium terrain set that they're putting out because that looks like it's going to be a lot more modular, and it's definitely going to give you a lot more options for building vertically and having a little bit more height on the board, which will add an interesting dynamic, especially if you're running a sniper who wants to get line of sight down on guys. But on top of that, the Spartan Edition is also going to come with a little bit more in the way of elevation to add some variety. So if you're picking up that copy of the game, then you'll have even more options for laying out your board. Now, flipping through the rulebook, I found that it was pretty interesting that the rulebook is not very long at all. And that's nice because I think this game is definitely going to be good for some newer players or people who aren't already playing any kind of miniatures game. And it can definitely be pretty intimidating when you pick up a new miniatures game when you see a 60 or 70 page long rulebook. That can be hard to get through for a brand new player. This is definitely closer to something like you would expect from a typical board game. It's a little bit easier to get through in one sitting and kind of understand everything that you need to know. And I found that it was laid out reasonably well, and the stuff was explained in a way that at least I myself found very easy to understand and kind of internalize just by reading through it once. The section with the rules actually isn't even the whole book because the back half of the book has a lot of things like references for special rules that you're going to find on your stat cards, as well as different scenarios and objective games. And that's the type of stuff that you can kind of just reference as you need as they come up in the game as you're playing. And honestly, after playing my first full game, I found that most of that stuff we had already remembered because you find that certain ones will come up very commonly, and by the time you read it once or twice, you already remember it and you don't have to continue to go reference. But the cool thing is you don't have to memorize any of that stuff. You really just need to be familiar with the rules from the first half of the book, and the reference stuff you can just look at as you need to. Now, one thing that I do think would be nice is if they had the rest of the rules reference things that are out on the smaller version of the board that were available to have laying out on the table for when you're playing a full-size game. Again, that's not the type of thing that really matters, especially once you have a couple of games under your belt. I think most of that stuff you're going to remember anyway, but I think it would be cool just for learning the game if there was a couple of more reference cards that you could lay out so that both players had it available to reference anytime they wanted to. Now, getting to the last part of the book, we have all the different scenarios, which include Slayer, which is just your typical deathmatch, and then 4 different objective-based scenarios that you can play. And this is really cool because I think skirmish games work really well when you have particular objectives, and it adds a lot of variety to the game so you don't just get bored of playing deathmatch constantly. The way that it has it set up is you can either play Slayer or you can roll on the table to choose from the 4 other objective game types like Oddball and Capture the Flag and things like that. Looking through the objective games, I think they add a lot of variety to the game, and I think it'll be kind of interesting to see how the rules interact with something that is a little bit more focused on picking up items and moving them to certain places as opposed to just fighting. The other cool thing is that they offer different game lengths based on how long you want to play, so there's usually going to be a short, a medium, and a longer version of the game that sets the number of points differently so that you can play in the amount of time that you want. Now, of course, you can do whatever you want with that. Once you have the game, it's yours. So if you want to play a super long game or a super short game, you can kind of do whatever you want to do. But I think it's cool that they account for that because, again, if you're looking at this game as a little bit of a lighter, faster game to play between some of the crunchier games that you might be into, and then you can sit down and play, let's say, a game of Slayer to 4 kills, and that's probably something that you can, once you're familiar with the rules, you could probably play that in 20 minutes, maybe a half hour. So when I played, I started out by playing the little demo scenario, and this actually has you start the game using less rules. There's not going to be item pickups or weapon spawns, and your Spartans are actually not going to respawn either. You just play 2-on-2 on a smaller map, and you get right into the fight, and once your Spartans die, you lose the game. This is a cool way to just kind of learn the basics of the combat interactions and the movement. And when I played, I actually ended up putting my brawler in kind of an unfortunate position, and my opponent was able to get up on top of some terrain and shoot down on him and really punish me for that. Once you're down to 2-1, there's not really a whole lot you can do to come back from that, and I did my best to put out some damage, but I think I really only plinked a couple of his shields off, and he was able to do a little pincer move and take me down without too much trouble. Now, I'd love to tell you that when we played the next scenario, I was able to get some revenge, but unfortunately, that's not the case. But hopefully I'm going to get him next time, so stay tuned. So after we did the little intro demo game, we decided to play a game of Slayer to a kill count of 8. And again, going into this game, I expected this to be a kind of light and fluffy experience, but I found that it was a little bit deeper and crunchier than I was expecting. To start the game off, we were pretty much just trying to jockey for position and get a couple of pot shots in against each other, and the command dice added an interesting element where when you put yourself in an advantageous position, you could get an extra shot, or you could use some of them to get a little bit of a bonus movement off so that you could get up into a tower or run over and pick up a weapon drop. It was pretty even to start off. We just traded a couple of kills and then respawned in different parts of the map. But then a fuel rod cannon actually spawned on top of one of these cargo containers, and my opponent was able to get up there and pick it up and just start laying down fire on me. He ended up opening up a 2-point lead by getting a bunch of kills with it, and I was trying to figure out some counterplays or ways that I could mitigate this and put the pressure back on him. Eventually, an energy sword actually spawned on the map, and I was able to position one of my Spartans so that when I activated him, I could run up, grab the energy sword, jump up onto the container, and try to kill him in close combat. Now, close combat is super deadly in this game, so I was expecting to go off without a hitch, but he actually had a command die that allowed him to basically fire Overwatch, which allows him to shoot at my Spartan before it gets into melee combat. But the trick there is he was wielding a fuel rod cannon, and when you fire an Overwatch, you're shooting the target when it's already in the same cube as you. And of course, the fuel rod cannon actually attacks the entire cube because it does blast damage exactly like you would expect from the video game. So he decided to shoot directly at our feet and risk a danger close shot to hurt himself in order to stop me from killing him. Now, it was probably a smart move because if I got in there with that energy sword, I was almost certainly going to be able to one-shot him. But the funny thing was that I actually rolled my saves a little bit better when he shot the fuel rod cannon, and I ended up hanging on with 1 point of health, and he ended up killing himself. It was a super cinematic moment. It's exactly the type of thing that you would expect to see from a really fun match of Halo multiplayer. But sadly, my Spartan ended up on 1 health, but he got pushed over to the adjacent cube where my opponent had a Spartan waiting, and he just activated that Spartan, meleeed me, took the last point of health off of him, and killed him. So it ended up being a suicide run for both of our Spartans, but it ended up being a ton of fun, and it was super cinematic. And I think that really epitomizes how well they captured the feeling of Halo multiplayer in this game. Unfortunately, he was able to maintain that 2-point lead, and I think by the end of the game it ended up being 8-6, and he took another one off of me. But like I said, I'm definitely coming back for more next time. We actually wanted to get another game in since then, but unfortunately I came down with COVID, so people didn't really want to play with me, which is understandable, but we're looking forward to getting another game in pretty soon. Now, the last thing that I wanted to talk about was at the very back of the book, they have this interesting idea for a draft mode for playing the game, especially for once you have a couple of more Spartans available in your collection to put down on the table. The way that the game works right now is you just have 4 Spartans to go against each other in-game, and there's no points mechanic for list building, but that is something that they are developing and is going to come in the future. So it's just 4v4, but if you have a famous character like Master Chief who's a little bit more powerful, he's just going to count as 2 entries in your side. So if you want to add even a little bit more variety to the game, instead of just having the 4 Spartans that the box comes with on each side, you can do what they call a draft. And in this way, players are going to alternate picking models out of the available collection back and forth so that they can kind of focus on certain loadouts or certain profiles that they like a little bit better. Interestingly, the Spartan Edition is going to come with 8 additional models that represent the same type of Spartan, but with different weapon loadouts to start. So I think this draft idea is going to be an interesting way to break things up and allow you to kind of focus on different profiles that you like better, or give you access to certain weapons that might be a little bit more powerful, and maybe try to deny your opponent from using those. Definitely a cool way to spice up the game a little bit, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what those profiles look like. Now, we already know that they have many, many plans to expand this game, and one of the other things that really struck me when I was playing my first couple of missions here is that the game seems like it's really modular and flexible, and that I think it's going to really benefit from adding a whole bunch of new stuff to the system down the road. You can already see some of the things that they've put in place to kind of future-proof it for when they add new stuff, and I'm sure there's already plans in place, and they already have a lot of those rules worked out. We just don't know about them yet. So, for example, there's a rule called Horde, which is probably going to be something that's used for the Flood when they inevitably come to the game. On top of that, there's weapons that have things like Armor Piercing 3, which, as of right now, don't do you any good because Spartans all have Armor 2. But, of course, we can expect to see some bigger and tankier things that might be coming down the line. Now, I'm really excited to see some of the really cool stuff from Halo come to the game, like Brutes and Elites, and maybe even things like Hunters. But honestly, I think I'm even more excited to see some of the smaller stuff come to the game. I'm really curious what they're going to do with things like Jackals and Grunts and ODSTs and Marines, and how they're going to change up their rules to make them feel a little bit less powerful and play more like you would expect them to play from what we know about the universe. All kinds of exciting stuff. I'm super looking forward to learning more, but I want to know what you guys think, so get down in the comments below and let me know. Have you had a chance to get a demo or actually play the Recon edition of the game as of yet? And what has your experience been like with it so far? Also, let me know what you're looking forward to coming to the game most down the road. I know that things like the Arbiter and other named characters from the game are on the top of people's list, so get down there and let me know what you're most excited about. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what I have coming up for Halo, and consider sharing this video with some other folks who you think might find it interesting or useful. On top of that, you can check out the description below for a bunch of important links, including a link to my Discord where you can come to chat about this game or anything related to the hobby or other miniatures games you might like. the merch store where you can pick up some merchandise with my logo and support the channel that way. I have a Ko-fi account now, so if you want to just give me a quick tip to say thanks for the video, then that's a great way to do that. Or if you want to support the channel more regularly, then you can check out the Patreon, where you can get a whole bunch of different benefits, as well as my eternal gratitude. On that note, I'd like to send a huge thank you to the extremely cool kids tier on Patreon, the Steam Powered Scoundrels, Dogman Ties, Devin, and the Spilled Paint Pot, and thanks for watching.